365 Sports, joined by Kendall Kauth, 365 college basketball analyst, breaks down quite a bit of what Baylor does. Kendall, we can look at the injuries, and they may never heal, may not all get healthy. Is it more than that? Is there something else besides, and I understand L.J. Cryer and Flagler and Sohan and all that, is there something deeper than that?
That's a good question, Smokey, and I think that there's a case to be made there is. Ultimately, my answer would be too soon to tell. I think the case for there is that Baylor shouldn't get blown out by that margin to KU. They shouldn't have played West Virginia that close. They couldn't stop Alabama. The case that we don't know is I think they're still operating under the assumption LJ will come back at some point soon. They haven't flipped things enough. I think there's a little bit of a reluctance to go all in on some of the crazier measures they could take. So I think it's possible. I think we'll know this week if it is deeper than that.
What happened to the defense that this team was known for early in the year? I mean, that Villanova game was swarming defense, and I know some of that's injuries, but right now they're exposed on defense a ton.
Yeah, Paul, I think there are a number of factors. The biggest one to me is just it feels like Baylor sometimes plays like 15 seconds of really elite defense. Like they assume if they trap somebody on one side of the floor that the possession's over. I think they're sometimes a little bit late in their rotations. I think they just don't finish possessions well sometimes. If an offensive rebound gets collected by the other team, I don't think their energy is quite there. And then in transition, Scott Drew talked about after the game, they didn't stop the ball very well. They didn't look out for guys. I thought their scouting report, attention to detail, although I know how detailed that report would be, wasn't very good in terms of you don't want to help off of certain guys. So I think their attention to detail hasn't been there for some of the players, and I just think that their ability to finish possessions has not been what it was earlier in the campaign.
How shocked were you by Saturday?
I could not have been more shocked. I thought there was a good chance the Bears could lose that game, but to see him absolutely eviscerated like that was pretty crazy. I had to leave with 4 minutes left to get to the media room, and so I had spent the last 4 minutes looking at what's the worst Baylor performance. And although this is only the worst performance since the loss to Texas Tech back in 2019, I thought this was probably the worst game I had seen relative to talent Baylor had played in 6 or 7 years. Just a really bad performance all around. Doesn't change the very high ceiling, my belief in the staff and the players, but really not a performance you expect from a team this good, and I was completely shocked by it.
I asked Scott Drew, and we had him on yesterday at the end of the show, but did you see any Kendall at all? And sometimes no matter how good a person you are, how strong of a competitor you are, that you just are overwhelmed. Did you see any quit at all from anybody?
I don't know, Smokey, that I saw any quit from him, but I felt like they kind of borrowed what's now become very cliched, the Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. It felt like once the game got about 10 points away from Baylor, their ability to just kind of play through it, look through a good possession, wasn't there. And I felt like certain guys were trying to do too much. James Akinjo goes 0 for 11. I don't know if that'll ever happen again the rest of his life playing basketball. But it felt like both him and Adam had some opportunities to hit John and Flo down low, try to do a little bit too much. And then at the same time, it felt like there were guys like Dale who had open three-point shots that were a little reluctant to take them in other opportunities. So I think Baylor was not expecting some of the adjustments, at least the players weren't. And when those happened, I don't think they responded as well as they could have.
Kendall, Kansas State is coming up tomorrow, and that's a team that they beat soundly the last time around, but it also a team that at their best can make you play really ugly. What do you expect to see from Baylor tomorrow night to have them rebound into being who they are before they welcome in Texas, who's coming off a huge win?
Yeah, Paul, I expect them to rebound well in this game. 25-point victory the last time out. Nigel Paxson, all Big 12 caliber player. Baylor held him in check pretty well last time. But this is where a tough championship-level team responds to the adversity they face. I mean, they should all be embarrassed by the performance they had on Saturday, given how good they are. They're better than K-State. Manhattan, Kansas can be a tough arena sometimes, but I wouldn't expect this to be as tough as the Octagon of Doom has been in past seasons with a midnight or a midweek game at 7 p.m. So this is where if you're a championship-caliber team, you respond well. I think Baylor will have some good adjustments, and some things about K-State's style bode well for how Baylor can adjust. So this is the moment where you really show who you are.
What did you think of that Texas win over the Jayhawks last night?
Yeah, Craig, I thought it was a real good performance by Texas. They got a little lucky at the end when Trey Mitchell banked in a three. I don't know that he could do that if he stood on the middle of the key and tried to do that 50 times in a row if he could do it once. But hard-fought game from Texas. When KU had a punch, Texas responded well, and that's really the goal. Put yourself in enough close games, you can get a little bit lucky. Credit to Texas for doing that, but I still have serious reservations about Texas, and I think KU is a little better than they were last night.
All right, I know that this Baylor fans may be like, oh, do you feel like If Baylor can at least win the game tomorrow night in Manhattan, they blew out Kansas State recently, just go take care of their business. Do you feel like that they might be getting Texas at the wrong time if they're not 100%?
Certainly, Smokey. And Texas will do a good job playing defense like a lot of Big 12 teams, including Baylor, play, where you have to basically run stuff in the middle of the court, which means you got to find shooters. KU did a good job daring Kendall Brown to take threes and daring Jeremy Sohan to not pump fake and take threes. My hope is that after Kendall Brown hit a couple of threes on Saturday, he'll just take those shots, not try and drive in. But Texas is going to play, I think, a pretty similar defensive style that Kansas played. The difference needs to be this time Baylor has to actually take the shots that are available, and their first-round draft picks that are worthy of that merit have to play like it.
Baylor and Kansas State tomorrow in Manhattan. Baylor coming off the humiliating loss to Kansas on Saturday in Lawrence. So how much does a loss like that, can you clear it? And most people, probably can't. Some can. Veterans or even young kids can't. How much can that stick in their head a little bit, even if they're a team that's the defending national champions and they were 15-0 at one point? Could that be a scar that lingers?
It potentially could, Smokey. I think that's the kind of game where you find out if you're as tough as you believe you are, if you're the kind of team that can continue to dive for loose balls, do the little things that win games. I mean, that's really kind of, we all have those ego moments where you think you're pretty high, you feel pretty good, then you get rejected from something or you don't get an opportunity you expected. And so this is the chance for Baylor. You're playing a team you were definitively more talented than. It is not going to be the most hostile environment in the world. And the world's kind of doubting. I mean, Seth Davis ranked Baylor 17th this week in the AP poll. A lot of people have given their list of who can win the title. Baylor's not appearing on a lot of those lists. And if you legitimately think, as Scott Drew mentioned, you were the best team in the country entering 2022, you got to go out and show a lot of fight in this game. I mean, maybe K-State goes 15 of 20 from three, but absent that, that's a game you really need to win and show you are a much better team than you were on Saturday in a different venue in Kansas.
How much do you put into the Pomeroy ratings or Evan Miyakawa, among others?
I use them a lot, Smokey. I think that for me, they're very helpful for kind of giving you tiers and then matching up styles of play. So there are some folks that really don't like analytics. There are other folks that kind of hate the X's and O's of the game. But I think you try and combine them and get a little bit more accurate. As Vegas shows, it's very tough to predict games, but you can get within a pretty good range. For example, I miss a lot of games, but last year when the bracket came out, a lot of people said Illinois would make the Final Four.
Yep.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to watch Loyola a few times, and I was like, Kofi Cockburn can't guard a big man in space. I think Loyola's going to win that game. Sure enough, Ken Pom said Loyola's a top 10 team. Illinois was a few spots better, but based on those metrics, they're pretty comparable teams. Then you come into styles, who's more successful. So I think it makes people more accurate when they use those metrics. But ultimately, as Jerome Tang says so often, it's the players that make the difference. Baylor has the players that show they're still a top 10 team, even with their recent slide. But Ken Pom, I think, is a very useful skill for people to kind of look at and be more accurate than just traditional metrics alone.
Thank you, Kendall. Appreciate you jumping on. As always, Kendall Kautz, Sikkim365.com, basketball analyst. We've got a bunch of them. Ashley Hodge, Jason King. Kendall does a great job. We brought him on earlier this year, and he does a spectacular job with basketball coverage as well. And he's not the only one. We've seen Jack write up stories as well.